Foxes by Ann Butler.
My closest neighbours, the Masters, live about 100 metres from me. When I say that, I mean that the border between our properties is about 100 metres from my home. Their home sits slap bang in the middle of their land, and mine is the same. When I look out of my kitchen windows, I can see the roof of their large bungalow. But when I look out of my living room window, which is at the front of my home, all I see are fields. Wide open fields where occasionally cows and goats graze. The cows and the goats keep to themselves and almost never stray too close to my fence line, which is just a simple wire fence. I don't have a problem with that side of things. But on the side where the Masters live, they are a problem. Jen and Dan Masters have wilded their land. On the face of it, that isn't a problem. It's not unsightly, even though it contrasts sharply with my huge, well-tended vegetable patch, which blends nicely, though I say so myself, into my pebbled walk and ornamental flower beds. I used to spend hours in my garden, leaving my doors and windows open to the fresh air. Now I don't dare because now I have a pest problem. A problem brought about by the Master's love of foxes. Foxes are the pests I'm referring to. They might be cute from a distance when there's only the occasional one passing by, which had been the case when I moved here 8 years ago. The Masters moved next door a year later. They came over to say hello and introduce themselves, really friendly. But then the trouble started. What caused the trouble? I mentioned foxes, right? Jen and Dan think they're cute. In fact, they love them so much that when a set of cubs appeared one spring, they built a den for them. Yeah. I shrugged when I caught on to what that rough construction they'd thrown together was for. It wasn't any of my business, and I didn't give it much thought. How naive was I? That fox family stayed put. They were being fed and treated like pets, so why would they leave? Season after season, new cubs appeared. Of course, they roamed all over, including into my garden. They screeched during the early hours of the morning. They crap and vomit in my vegetable patch. I've stopped growing veg because of that. They even trashed my greenhouse the times I forgot to look up. When they got curious enough to start venturing into my house when the doors were left open, I went to have a word with Jen and Dan. They were all friendly and that, laughingly saying I was overreacting, that the foxes mean no harm. I have to admit I lost my temper and started shouting. They were truly bewildered by my reaction. For a few moments I thought they were just being passive-aggressive, but no, they were really mystified by my anger. I mentioned something about it down the local pub, and 1 or 2 people gave me some suggestions as to what I could do. Some of their options sounded too extreme to me, so in the end I dug deep and accepted I'd have to live with it. I tried really, really hard, but it eventually became too much after Dan and Jane went on an extended trip and left their place empty. The worsening of the stink from their plot and the increase in the number of blue bottles during the summer months made my life a flipping misery. I spent a fortune putting up fencing to keep the foxes out, but they're agile buggers and can jump much higher than I imagined. One night, the screaming and screeching got so loud it sounded like someone was being murdered. The next day, I heard rumours that Jen and Dan had decided to extend their trip even further. I snapped. I was ridding myself of these pests by hook or by crook. I got online and did some research. Some sort of ultrasound device seemed to be the way to go. I browsed and then decided on which model I'd go for, and then I bought 4 of them. Ignoring the smell from the other side of the fence, I placed the devices around the points in the garden they seemed to like crapping in. A few days later, I had to accept that the devices were worse than useless. especially when I caught sight one day of a fox cub trying to dig it out of the ground. Taking the piss or what? Okay, what else can I try, internet? Pee? Do you mean like marking my territory? Is that what that's about? Sounds plausible. I drank a lot of water, and as a result I was able to fill 4-litre bottles of unadulterated urine and went to work spraying down the fences around my garden. I repeated this for days. It kept them away for about a week. At least it seemed to have masked the awful smells. Small consolation. Okay, internet. What else can I try? Oh, I need to deter them from their habitat? Okay. How do I do that? Make it as uncomfortable for them as possible. And how do I do that? Chilies? Chilies? Chilies. Apparently they hate chilies. The instructions say, get a whole heap of chilies, chop them up and put them in boiling water. Leave it to steep and then use a solution to spray their habitat with the peppery solution. Repeat every few days. Okay? That would mean trespassing on Jen's and Dan's land, but they weren't here, and the pestilence they created was, so I was more than happy to trespass on their land. I planned to do the spraying during daylight, when the foxes tended to be out and about, especially now that they were not being fed regularly. I worked one of the fence panels free and began wading through the waist-high brambles, nettles, grasses, cowslips and the like. Thankful that I'd opted to wear wellies, I made my way towards the habitat that Dan and Jen had built. The smell was getting worse the closer I got to it. So was the buzz of bluebottles. God only knew how bad would be the build-up of fox crap and rotting, scavenged food. I got distracted by a swarm of bluebottles, and as I swatted at them, my boots squelched into something especially stinky. So stinky I gagged. When I looked down and saw what I'd stepped in, I immediately started to vomit. And then I cried out. Then I vomited again. What I had seen was a melted face with matted brown hair. Awful. I stumbled back the way I'd come without taking a second look. There was an inquest. At the inquest, it came out that, yes, the Masters had decided to extend their trip. Jen had opted to come home for a few days to sort out the necessary bits and pieces. By the look of it, she'd taken a walk in the garden and had suffered some kind of medical event. According to the coroner, she'd already passed away by the time the foxes had started to feed. We can only hope for her sake that his conclusion was accurate.
You have just listened to Foxes. The story was written by Ann Butler and is a work of fiction. Sound effects were provided by Pixabay. If you enjoyed listening to this story, please like and subscribe to the channel to receive notification of new episodes. Please note that no portion of this story may be adapted or broadcast without written permission from Ann Butler or a representative from the Book Griffin channel.